When the Revised Standard Version of the Bible was first published in 1952, a pastor in western North Carolina was so disturbed by the new translation that he gathered up all the copies he could find and had a public Bible burning. Supposedly, what incensed the pastor so much was that while the old King James Version of John 14:2 says, "In my Father's house there are many mansions," the Revised Standard Version said and put it this way, "In my Father's house are many rooms." The North Carolinian pastor was infuriated with the cheapskates and communists who translated the RSV. He said that he had been promised a mansion in the sky in the King James Version, and nobody, yes, nobody, was doing that to take away that promise from him. I can appreciate the pastor's sentiment to a point. The first 6 verses of today's gospel reading are often heard faithfully in the context of funerals and the promise of eternal life. I referred to that with the children a few moments ago. They are reassuring words of Jesus to his followers before he leaves them. These words are meant to bring comfort and assurance. Every once in a while I hear this text read and miss that old word, mansions, myself. I finally made the switch to the newer versions one day when I stopped and tried to visualize what a house with many mansions inside of it would look like. Doesn't quite make sense. I can easily picture a house that is a mansion. I can picture a neighborhood of mansions. But for the life of me, I cannot picture a house with many mansions inside of it. My affection for the older translation was based on familiarity and sentimentality rather than sound biblical scholarship. The problem of interpretation here, brothers and sisters, is that we are not quite sure how to translate these words from the original Greek. And also the meaning of words changes over time. The old Latin translation rendered the word mansio meant a halting place, a way station, a rest stop. Hence our English word mansion. So to be fair, when the King James Version was put together in England in that period of time, that was the understanding of the word. But it changed into the American mansion of 6,000 square feet. Presbyterians call their parsonages the manse, which comes from the same root word in Latin. The New Revised Standard Version that we are consistently using in public worship puts it this way. "Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many dwelling places." The Greek word translated dwelling places is monai, often translated staying or dwelling or abiding. We've had this word in most of our gospel readings for the past 3 weeks. John uses the word on several levels of meaning. It can mean something as simple as your street address or where you are hanging your hat for the night. It can also mean, where is your truest home? Where does your heart abide or dwell? Where is the spot of your rock-solid identity within a fast-changing world? Some form of this Greek word mene appears 40 times in John's Gospel, finding its fullest usage in the next chapter 15, where in 14 verses it is used 11 times. There are two dimensions to this promise Jesus proclaims to his disciples before his death and resurrection. The most attractive dimension to the promise, at least for the pastor in 1952, is that Jesus is going ahead of the disciples to prepare a future, eternal, blissful dwelling place for them in heaven. And that's a dimension of the translation. But that most apparent dimension is based upon a more immediate promise that has been there with the disciples all along the journey. Jesus has already come to the disciples, to us, to make a dwelling place for God in our lives. Jesus is already our personal promise. Jesus makes his dwelling place in relationship to us. Jesus already brings the heart of God's love to us and creates a home. Yes, much of the promise is over the horizon, but much of the promise is also as close as a baptismal font, as close as a communion rail, as close as God's people gathered together for meaningful conversation. A woman named Julia attended the Bible study classes in the nursing home regularly that she was in. The fact that she was 105 years old did not keep her away. She wheeled herself to the Bible study in her wheelchair. She heard Jesus telling his followers not to be troubled and not to be afraid of the unknown in the discussion of the Bible study. She heard Jesus speak of preparing a place for them. And then Julia piped up with a glowing insight. There is not a spot where God is not. There is not a spot where God is not. The spot may be heaven. The spot may also be the temporary quarters of a nursing home. Jesus' words in today's gospel were spoken at the Last Supper on the night before his death. Jesus offered these words of encouragement to bolster the disciples' sagging spirits. Jesus offered these words not to many rooms where segregated people can hear their private promise in separate places, but in one room, a great room, the upper room, around a table eating a meal. In this room, there may be many spots, but there's only one large room. The sanctuary we gather in right here is basically one room with many places, many dwelling places. There's a spot for you and a spot for me. You are the spot of his personal dwelling. I am the spot of God's promised abiding. Christ promises to dwell here with us even as he goes right ahead to prepare a more lasting dwelling place. Jesus promised to go ahead of his followers so that no place would be devoid of his presence and help. Even the place of betrayal, even the place of the skull, even the place of burial, Jesus promises to go and dwell in those places too. All to point to something greater and more permanent than death and loss. Brothers and sisters, Jesus promises to be in the places that are sometimes dark and terrifying. Jesus prepares places of betrayal and denial and death with his burning light. The one who tasted death and hell gives us a promise that is more solid than mansions or imaginative constructs of mansions. Jesus Christ, who is the way, the truth, and the life, is our rock-solid foundation for living as God's people in whatever place we find ourselves. There is not a spot where God is not. Do not let your hearts be troubled. Believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house there are many dwelling places. Thanks be to God.